Sam, it is lovely to chat to you today for She Can. Tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Okay, I'm just wondering how far to go back, but probably if I go back, I'll give you a potted history very quickly. So what I do now is that I'm a food and health writer, and I'm the author of 2 books, The Midlife Kitchen and The Midlife Method. But surprisingly, probably to some, I don't really have a background in nutrition originally. I started life as a management consultant way back in the early 90s. I then, my husband and I set up a travel company called Ski Safari, which is still going in spite of the pandemic. We're still clinging on. And I basically worked for the travel business until my second child was born, which was, let me get this right, 2007. And then I think, as most women at that stage of life, when they sort of suddenly, I had 2 children then, and I decided I needed to take a year out to sort of focus on them, and then sort of never went back to the business. And it was at that point I had that moment where I thought, I've got to slightly reinvent myself here. You know, I need to find something else that is going to keep my brain stimulated and keep me engaged and interested, but fits around the kids. So it's kind of that eternal, I think, dilemma for most mums, isn't it? So that's really where this was. Actually, it started off not so much with food, but I went back to college and studied wine. I went back and did a wine. It's called the WSET diploma, and it essentially teaches you to go into the wine trade, either as a sommelier or a producer. And so my idea then was to become a wine buyer and a wine writer. So I was sort of moving in that direction. That's what I wanted to do. I set up a little wine buying business. And then, sorry, I'm really gabbling here. This is a long answer to quite a short question, but
you're doing
I then decided as a family we wanted to take a year out and do something different. The kids were about 11 and 6 at that time. This was 2013. And we decided to take a year out as a family and move to Asia as a sort of like a family experience. So we kind of left our business in the capable hands of our management team and set off on this adventure to Bali. And 1 year actually became 5 years. So we never came back really from Bali. We decided that the business was being really well run and we were loving Bali, so we stayed. And that's where really the food side of things started to roll, because I became very, very interested in healthy eating, mainly because of the environment that I was in. It was the food scene in Bali is very, very about, I guess it's an influence from Australia. This is the health food scene from Australia had sort of come over, and the Balinese were doing it in their own way. There was a great sort of health food scene going on, and I kind of got sucked into that. And on the back of that, had the idea for the first book, which is called The Midlife Kitchen. And it's basically about optimizing your health through nutrition in midlife. So that's kind of sort of a potted history to sort of bring you up to, that was 2017.
Sam, I love that. Thank you so much for going into detail and telling us your journey to where you are today. Tell us a little bit more about the Midlife Method, which I think is your second book, right?
Yeah, it is. So the Midlife Kitchen did really, really well. I wrote it with a good friend of mine, Mimi Spencer, who's actually, I know her from school actually when our kids were tiny, but she's a writer, quite a well-known writer, and she wrote The Fast Diet with Michael Mosley. So that was sort of very much her area, and she came out to Bali and we embarked on this Midlife Kitchen project together. We just thought it would be, the midlife thing wasn't really happening. It hadn't really become mainstream back in, this was 2016, I think. We were still talking about middle age. It hadn't really moved into being termed midlife and being embraced. So we were kind of right on at the start of that movement, really. So we did the Midlife Kitchen. That hit the spot really in terms of the midlife movement and did very well. And on the back of that, but what I found was, although people were really interested in optimizing their nutrition, there was a real issue still with a lot of midlife women, and when I say midlife, like roughly 40 plus, that, you know, there's no actual definition to it, they felt like they were eating quite well and eating quite healthily, but they were still putting weight on for obvious reasons, hormones, blah, blah. But they felt frustrated because they're like, well, I feel like I'm doing all the right things. I'm eating my fruit and veg. I've got, I'm trying to eat well, but I've still, I've got this extra weight that I'm carrying. So the Midlife Method, which my second book is called How to Lose Weight and Feel Great After 40. So what I then did was like a deep dive into the reasons why managing your weight gets harder when you get into midlife. I wanted to really look at the sort of science behind it, and then actually translate that into what you can do in the kitchen, because it's all very well knowing these things, but you then actually have to look at what you're eating. It's not so much a diet. I mean, there is a focus on calories. It's more on weight management. So it's like, what are the sort of long-term habits that you can get into and the changes you can make that will help you lose weight sustainably over, for the long term. So although it does talk about calories, it's in a wider context really of making sustainable changes to the way that you eat and improving your relationship with food, which actually is the key to it really.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think we women have such a controversial relationship with food all throughout our lives, or many of us do. So I think it's an amazing book. I've got it. So thank you. It's an amazing contribution, I think. And thank God the midlife movement is really gaining speed and women are heard. And Sam, tell me a little bit how your life changed with the first book and the second book, and what motivates you to be on this path.
Sure. So the first book, well, pedaling back to when we got to Bali, I really sort of felt a huge need to overhaul my own health. So I wasn't writing about food. I wasn't thinking about books. I wasn't recipe developing. I just wanted to sort out my own nutrition. Because I had, unfortunately, and I write about this in the books, one of my brothers, my youngest brother Ben, died when he was 27 from type 1 diabetes. And I know that that's an autoimmune disease and it's not a lifestyle disease, but it got me actually to think about how I needed to appreciate the fact that I had this healthy body and my brother had been sort of robbed of his healthy body and I should be taking better care of my own. So that was really my thought process. And I had never really paid that much attention to it. So that was my initial motivation. I thought, I want to drop some of this weight. I want to change the way that I view food. I want to make friends with food again. And I want to get away from the tyranny of always sort of seeing food as the enemy, which is, I think, a lot the mentality that you can grow up with if you've been used to doing diets and constantly trying to lose weight and that kind of thing. I thought, I've got to change this. So that was my initial motivation. And then I think because I saw within the things that I did effectively formed the basis of the Midlife Method. So although that book only came out last year, it's effectively what I did way back in 2013. And at the time, I wrote a little ebook about it because I thought, actually, this is what what am I doing? What's working? What's not working? I wrote a little ebook called The Happy Eater. And that's really became the basis for the Midlife Method. But obviously, over the years, I've done nutritional qualifications now, and I've done chef training and things. So it's evolved a long way from the beginning. So I had that idea really, really early on. And I thought, this has really worked for me. In the course of a year, I've really managed to change everything about how I eat. And I want to just write it down because I think there are some good ideas there. So that was my initial motivation. And then once I got to Bali and was so inspired about food, I just kind of wanted to share that with other people. And so when my friend Mimi came over to Bali, we hadn't really thought about doing a book. We thought about maybe doing a blog together. And just sort of putting this sort of really accessible, delicious, healthy food out on a blog and just seeing what happened. But I think because it kind of really filled a niche, publishers were quite interested in it quite quickly. So we sort of sent the idea out to a few publishers and they were interested in it. I think that was good timing, basically. And actually the staying motivated and then the sort of writing has just built up slowly. So the second book took a little while to get a book deal because, weight loss books, there are a lot of those. It's harder to convince a publisher that your weight loss book is going to do well because they must get inundated with people saying, look at my ideas for weight loss. But eventually I got the book deal for that. And then I started doing freelance writing, and now I write for the Telegraph. So it's been a very slow burn. But the way I always say to people is, I'm not particularly aggressive in how I do this, because it still has to fit around everything else. It's not like I'm, constantly pitching ideas. But what I do think you have to do is you have to keep knocking on doors, and eventually one will open. So it sounds like, oh, you've been so lucky, you've had this book, and then you've got another book deal, you've got another book deal. But in between all those things happening, there were lots of things that didn't happen. There were lots of things I tried that didn't work. There were lots of people I approached to work with on things that came to nothing. The writing for the Telegraph, that came about because they serialized my book, and I just pitched some ideas to them, thinking it wouldn't come to anything. And one of the ideas they liked and they picked up. And then, so it's been it's not like there's a set route to doing these things. I would just say, if you have an idea, just act on it. Just do something with it. If you think it's a good idea, like we thought the Midlife Kitchen, it's a good idea. But the difference was we actually acted on it, and that was the thing that sort of stuck. So, and I still have the same approach. I just think, okay, well, who are the people I really like, what they're doing on Instagram? I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to say, do you want to do something together? 9 times out of 10, they'll say no, or ignore you, or won't happen. But sometimes they do. And actually, I've now got a really good network through social media of other midlife influencers. You contacted me through Instagrams, and now we've got this connection. And that's kind of how it goes. But you do have to be quite patient, I think, and just sort of keep going.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's very important. People always look on someone's CV and think, oh, one thing just led to another. Well, a lot of things lead to nothing, and you keep going. And
they do. And you've got to have that mindset of not being too discouraged when you don't seem to be getting any kind of momentum. It can be very frustrating, and you feel like I'm really wasting my time. And there have definitely been times when I've thought about, like when you're trying to grow your Instagram account and it's really not working, and you get one day you have loads of unfollows, and you posted something you thought was really great. But I think you have to just build up a certain amount of resilience to that, and just think, I think also, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, I really enjoy what I'm doing. I'm kind of doing it anyway. The way I see it, I have to eat 3 meals a day. I might as well make them lovely and nutritious. I might as well post them on Instagram. I'm doing it anyway. So it sort of keeps me motivated, social media, to keep creating things that people are gonna enjoy. And actually you get a lot of feedback. And actually another really great thing is my last book, Midlife Method, I actually asked some of my followers if they wouldn't mind recipe testing for me before the book went to be published. And I had some lovely ladies say, yeah, great. And so they were part of the process of producing that book, which was really nice. So it can work in all sorts of different ways. But yeah, it's really just keep going. And if you've got a really good idea, just do something with it. Don't set yourself a really aggressive time frame. Just do something with it. Contact some people you think might be interested. Talk about your friends. You might get a friend who wants to collaborate with you, like Mimi did with me, and collaborating makes it even more fun. So yeah, just if you've got that little burning idea, just carve out a little bit of time if you can. Everybody's different. I mean, I'm in a slightly advantageous position at the moment, whereas my kids are a bit older, so I do have a little bit more time. When the kids were really young, it was harder, but you just find little bits and bobs of time, write down your ideas, even if you can't act on them, write them down, and maybe one day you'll come back to them.
Thank you for all those tips, Sam. That's great. Sam, what do you think is your superpower? What do you think you have that made you successful in this particular area?
I think probably tenacity. Like I tend to just keep going. Yeah, I don't really tend to give up on things too easily. And if I've got something that I believe in, I'll just kind of keep going with it to the bitter end. And like I said, it might lead to nothing, but I will just keep going with it. And I think the other thing that's really been helpful for me is, rather than thinking about being successful or anything like that, it's about enjoying what I'm doing and keeping some balance in my life. So, I'm doing all this writing, but there are other things that I have to do. I have to look after my family. I have to make sure, I'm running a home still and all that kind of thing. And I think that just trying to keep a balance, seeing enough of my friends, making sure I fit in my exercise, all those things are really important in terms of my overall sense of well-being. So I don't just see my work as the most important thing. It is important, and I do prioritize it to a certain degree, if I've got a deadline or whatever. But I think if any one part of your life is particularly out of balance with the other things, it can lead you to feeling quite stressed and quite dissatisfied. So I would say that's also quite an important thing that I've learned about myself, that's what I need.
Yeah, I think that's particularly important for us women. We have always got more than a job. It's many more things that we do in our lives. So thank you for sharing that. Sam, what are your dreams for the future? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years' time? Are there new projects on the horizon? What are your plans?
Definitely. Well, I'm keeping going with the book writing. I've got another one that's on the boil at the moment, and I'm talking to my publisher this week about that. I haven't actually started it, so I'm hoping that one will go, and I'll be working on that probably for the next 6 months. I'm very keen to build up my freelance writing, so I'm writing for the Telegraph on a regular basis now, and one of my aims for this year is to broaden that out and write for more food publications and health publications. And I really want to just keep going with that. I think in 5 to 10 years, the great thing about writing is there's no timeline on it. I can see myself still writing in 5 to 10 years' time. Maybe I'll broadened out what I write about, maybe move into other areas. Because I'm a trained sort of sommelier, I would love to do more on the wine side of things, which people find funny because I'm a food and health writer. And then I also write about alcohol, which it doesn't quite seem to go together. But I think it kind of does, because my philosophy is a little bit like you don't have to cut anything out. So if you enjoy drinking wine, you can still do that within the context of having a healthy diet. So I don't really subscribe to that. You mustn't eat this or you mustn't drink that. So I'd like to do a bit more with that. So yeah, I've got a few plans. Geographically, we're a bit all over the place. So we were in Bali, and then we moved to Singapore, and then because of the pandemic, we've had to move back to the UK. So we've been in the UK since the summer, and we're still a little bit unsure about how long we're going to be here. So, we do like the sun. So we're thinking possibly we might move to Portugal in the future. That's another idea we've had. So maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be sat in Portugal writing about wine. Maybe.
I love it. I think that's an amazing plan. Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Sam. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. It's lovely to meet you. And I look forward to seeing She Can evolve and grow. And I'll watch with interest.
Thank you so much.